Hey folks, so one thing that has been extremely highly requested ever since I started doing my speedruns is a guide to every single consumable that is used in all of my runs. And it's pretty intense to look at like all of these different items in my bags and try to figure out, what does this icon mean? What is that? Or sometimes you just see me use an item and you don't feel like going into the video to try and find the tooltip and you're just like, what is that thing? So I've tried to explain it in the comments a few times, but I know that's a bit hard to find, so I figured I would just make this guide to answer every single question about the different items, consumables, enchants, like everything. Pretty much anything that I use to prepare for a speedrun will be covered here. Now I will note really quick, this video is like completely unscripted on the fly in one take, so I might fuck things up. I'm trying to get a lot of stuff done today, so I wanted to get this out because it's been extremely highly requested. Another thing, this is done on beta, so I don't know if there's any way for me to show that it's on beta. I guess I could show that you can see, or well, I guess, yeah, no. Oh yeah, bug reporter, you don't have that on live. So yeah, it's done on beta. The reason for this is because, as you might imagine, this stuff is very expensive, and I am pretty much out of gold on Mal'Ganis because after doing my recent Druid run, I pretty much spent it all. I had to do a lot of like crafty like character swaps over to beta in order to even be able to assemble all of the stuff you have before you. And even then, this isn't necessarily the full list of items that I would use for a run. Like, this is every single individual item, but for example, I have only 20 Gunshoes. Normally I'd go in with like 100 Gunshoes just to be safe. But every single item that I use, I have at least one of, so that I can demonstrate it in this video. So without further ado, let me get into things. So for starters, I've decided to sort the items into three categories. One is items that I think you should probably be using no matter what you're doing, even if you aren't speed leveling, as long as you want to make it efficient. And that's this bag right here. Then this little section here is items that I think you could probably go without for regular, like, fast leveling, but if you're doing, like, actual speed runs, they're very, very necessary. And then all of these items are stuff that's, like, very much niche items or not entirely impactful, where, like, even if you are doing a speed run, it's only going to save you a very minor amount of time, so unless you're actively going for world record, it's probably not necessary. So starting off with the absolutely everybody should do this, I recommend it gear, let's just go into the heirlooms. So heirlooms are interesting because they used to obviously be completely mandatory, and now they really aren't. So heirlooms are still really good, but there's some situations where you'll actually want to use crafted gear over heirlooms. I'll cover that later. But that said, for certain parts of the run, you will still be using heirlooms, and for the average player, it's obviously just the best cost-efficient choice that you can make. Another thing I would generally recommend is just enchanting your heirlooms, especially if you plan on leveling like multiple characters of a same armor type. So, for example, let's say I'm going to level a demon hunter, a monk, and a druid. Well, most of the items you see here can be used on a demon hunter, a monk, or a druid. So if you buy one enchant for each item, you can basically reuse it 3 times. So I would say that's worth your money. So these items are all, of course, tailored towards leather wearers, but the general principle applies. So for capes, you're always going to want to use the gift of whatever stat enchants. So this is gift of versatility. No matter what class you are, just pick the stat that you want, but make sure it's the gift of enchant. Because gift of enchants give +2 of the stat and +2 speed. And obviously, when doing speed leveling, movement speed is important. For chest, the best one you can get is glorious stats. Now, post-level squish, there are a few other X of stats that give +4. So it used to be that just Glorious was the best one, but now a few have scaled to the point where they're on equal footing with Glorious. So I'd recommend checking the auction house, finding which one is the cheapest, and as long as it gives +4 all stats, you're good to go. For shoulders, you're going to want to use the Mists of Pandaria enchants. The one that I have here is called Greater Tiger Claw Inscription. I forget what the names of the other ones are, but it's Mists of Pandaria enchanting, look for shoulder enchants. It's, as far as I know, the only set of shoulder enchants in the game, and that's what you're going to want to go with. So, next up for weapon enchants. This one's a bit more complicated. I couldn't really get all of the different weapons Obviously, Elemental Force is by far your best option for most melee DPS. For strength DPS, or any strength user, so like even like a protection paladin, Crusader is a solid option. I'm not 100% sure, honestly, if Crusader is better, but it's definitely like as good, if not potentially better. But for any non-strength user, you're going to want to go with Elemental Force. This thing is very, very good. Now, it should be worth noting that this only procs on melee attacks, so you're probably going to have to get creative for other classes. I'm not entirely sure what casters use. I generally don't level casters. But I'd say probably just take whatever the best option is on like your Icy Veins or Discord guide for max level. That generally tends to be the best. I don't think they have any like really efficient low level item. And then for hunters are weird. Technically incendiary ammunition is good, but I've had issues applying it to certain items. Gale Force Striking is another good option for some classes or some specs. But, like, Gale Force Striking is good when you get certain procs, like, especially for BM, that make your auto attacks give you, like, Barb Shot resets, but before then, it's not great. Hunter and Caster and Chance are just kind of strange. I'd recommend doing some more research into whatever particular class you plan on playing, but a good blanket rule for all other classes is if you're using Strength, Crusader, or Elemental Force, if you're using Agility, Elemental Force. Now, for Pants and Chance, that rhymes. We have Leg Armor. So Leg Armor is, I believe, a Cataclysm enchant. This one in particular is called Shadow Leather Leg Armor. There's a few others. Obviously, this one gives 6 Agility. There's one that gives 6 Strength, and I believe another that gives 6 Intellect. Pretty straightforward. So Rings. Rings are an interesting case in that I actually do not 100% recommend using Heirloom Rings. If you have them, there are certain cases in the run where they are useful and you will see me use them. But if you don't have them, I would not recommend going out and farming them. These 2 rings in particular. They're very annoying to get, especially Dread Pirate Ring. And especially now with the heirloom changes, they really aren't worth it. That said, just in general, for ring enchants, be it on heirlooms or crafted rings, which I'll cover later, you're going to want to use a cord enchants. So here I have a cord of versatility, +9. That's the highest you can get. There's a cord of every major stat, a cord of haste, etc. Next, we have Neck. So Necklace is an interesting case. Minari Training Amulet is specifically the necklace that you absolutely want to use. So there's a lot of different heirloom necklaces, and this one is still kind of complicated to get. But unlike these 2 rings, which are also kind of hard to get, I absolutely recommend getting Minari Training Amulet. Like, it's going to, I believe it's a Legion mission board item. It's going to take you a bit of time if you haven't really played Legion, but it is absolutely worth it. This thing is so good. Pretty much ever since it came out, I've been using this. It's an extra speed pot that has its own cooldown, and it has infinite uses. It's just good. There's really nothing else to say. It's a good item. And for Neck enchants, you're going to want to use Mark of the Hidden Satyr, pretty much no matter what you're playing. Mark of the Hidden Satyr is just really good. Another reason why you'll want to get Minari Training Amulet is this necklace has been passed around to every single character I've leveled. A Minari Training Amulet with Mark of the Hidden Satyr is just every class's best option. So you get one of these, you throw Satyr on it, and you will reuse it every single time you level a character. It is well worth the time invested. The only other enchants I'll cover, so there are a lot of different crafted items that you can get. There's a lot of different enchants for low-level stuff for non-heirlooms. So like gloves have enchants, bracers have enchants. There are belt buckles, which you can add a socket to a belt and stuff. It's not entirely worth it, really. That probably falls into the category here of like stuff that is really, really min-maxy and 99% of people will not care about. It's not worth your time. The only enchant that I would say is absolutely worth your time is Enchant Boots Minor Speed. This is, generally speaking, very cheap. Obviously, I can't speak for everybody, like, in their server prices, but on my server, this thing is dirt cheap. I mean, I have 9 of it here. I think I initially bought, like, a stack of 20 of those things for, 200 gold. It was worth almost nothing, and this gives you 10% movement speed. So even if you end up using like 3 of these to enchant new boots during a run, it is worth it. It is very, very worth it. 10% movement speed adds up. And especially since this is one of the relatively inexpensive enchants, for it to be that good, it's very, very worth it. Next, we have something that most people know about, but just in case you don't, because I've had a few people asking, Draught of the Ten Lands, or fuck it, I don't know how to say that. Draft, you know what I mean. It increases all your stats by 5, but the more important thing is it gives you 10% experience. And this is obtained through the 7th Legion or Honor-Bound Service Medals in BFA. So to get those, you either do Honor-Bound Emissaries, I believe you can get them through Warfronts, and then obviously the Faction Assaults, which occur, I believe, like once every 16 hours. I forget the exact number is, but something around there. So get those. It's 5 honor medals for a single potion, and obviously, like, do I really need to explain why having 10% extra experience is good? It's really not hard to farm the medals, and, you know, it's going to save you time. It's just a flat 10% time save. Next up, classic, but still worth covering, Goblin Glider Kit. Really not much to say here. I guess for anybody who hasn't seen Goblin Glider Kit, let me just show it real quick. You do this, and then, yeah, you glide. So, you know, at low levels, you have temporary flying when jumping from a high place for a bit. And it's actually quite fast. It is deceptively fast. It's faster than regular flying. So there are certain cases when you still have slow flying where it's faster to dismount Goblin Glider and then like land at your location if you time it right, because you get a minor move speed buff over slow flying. So it's just something to consider. But Goblin Glider is obviously really, really good. Next, drums. Obviously prices depend on your server, but drums are obviously really good. If you have lust, like if you're a mage or you're a BM hunter and something like that, then, you know, you don't need to buy them. You can just use your pet lust or time warp or, you know, what am I thinking? Shaman bloodlust, the actual ability. So yeah, that will save you a bit of money. But even if you aren't one of those classes, I recommend just packing 20 drums. They're very, very cheap, at least on my server. And when you're pulling like a big elite or a giant pull with like 20 mobs or something, if you pop one of these, it could quite literally save your life. So for something that gives you such a huge damage increase when you need it, just, you can't really go wrong with Lust. I mean, everybody knows how this works, but I really do think it's important for leveling. Next up, we have mount equipment. And this is something that is relatively new, so a lot of people probably aren't familiar with it. But if you open up your mount tab over here, you can see this little thing down here. So I have a My Demon Hunter, and I'm not going to replace it. So just trust me that when I say you right-click this, it replaces Angler's Water Striders. The one I have equipped makes me walk across water. Now, this is possibly something you can use. It's not used in speedruns because you have multiple ways to really quickly get across water. If you really want to be lazy, it's an option. You could do that. Personally, I don't really care enough because, you know, I have Gunshoes and XA1000 surface skimmers, which I'll cover in a bit, so I don't need it. But the two that you're going to want to use in the speedrun, the first one is Light Step Hoof Plates. This is just a 20% ground mount increase. That's just good. You know, 20% faster, nothing to scoff at. And then, depending on what class/race you play, you might, or class/spec, I should say, you might want to use Comfortable Riders Barding. So this makes it so you cannot be dazed while mounted, and it's debatably useful. In some cases, you obviously still want to use the Light Step Hoof Plates, but if you're not playing a tank, this could be useful. If you are playing a tank, for the record, never use this. You automatically get immunity to daze while mounted and while dismounted, so it's quite literally doing nothing for you. If you aren't playing a tank, maybe consider using this. It's hard to say. I mean, it's a judgment call, but it's actually somewhat useful, so I'll, you know, let you consider that. And then the final stuff that we have in the I recommend everybody get this before they level a character category is the Darkmoon quest items. Now, this is probably the most fringe one, because everything that you see here, you can probably go and pick up off the auction house, with maybe the exception of 1 or 2 of these enchants. Some of them can be a bit pricey, but like I said, it's pricey, but it's worth it because you can reuse it on all of your characters. But everything else you see here, drums, glider, potions, minor speed, mount equipment, It's all basically dirt cheap in the auction house, but it saves you a very, very, very concrete amount of time. Darkmoon quest items will save you a lot of time and are very, very useful. However, they tend to be on most servers in like a bit of a higher price range, especially while Darkmoon Fair is up. So if you plan on leveling characters like a few months from now, like in the middle of Shadowlands, what I recommend doing is when Darkmoon Fair is not up, go ahead and buy them in like a lull, because the prices usually tank, and then you'll have them saved up for when Darkmoon Fair actually rolls around. But when Darkmoon Fair rolls around, everybody goes, oh shit, I forgot to get my quest items. And then they go, and the price skyrockets, and then you're paying like 2,000 gold per. It's just not fun. Now, it is worth noting you can farm some of these yourself, but they're a bit of a pain in the ass. I tried. The drop rate is just abysmal for some of them, so I usually just buy it. But now I'll just go over them real quick. So you have Fallen Adventurer's Journal, Captured Insignia, and Banner of the Fallen. These three are obtained from Battlegrounds. Then you have Monstrous Egg, Ornate Weapon, A Treatise on Strategy, Soothsayer's Runes, Imbued Crystal, and Mysterious Grimoire. These are all obtained from dungeons with the exception of Soothsayer's Runes, which I believe is from raid bosses. Could be wrong in that, but I think that's what it is. But basically, most of them have like these weird like level requirements where it's like you need to be doing stuff at level content, but then, you know, they don't drop from like current content BFA dungeons. So it's like you need to be leveling a character and doing specific dungeons at level in order to get the drops. It's a headache. I don't think it's worth it. So obviously, you know, you pick one of these up. So let's see, I right click this, it gives me a quest. So it's bring this to Thaddeus Palo. I receive 850 experience, obviously scales to your level, and 5 Darkmoon prize tickets. Now, the reason you're doing this, on top of the instant experience it gets, is for the prize tickets. Because with the prize tickets, what you can do is get one of these things, Darkmoon Tophat. And Darkmoon Tophat gives you 10% increased experience for 1 hour. Now, I know that a lot of people are well aware of all of the different like ways that you can get the Darkmoon Fair XP buff. There's obviously the carousel. The carousel is cost efficient in that you don't need to get any of this stuff. That said, it's a major time loss to have to go all the way back to the carousel, and trust me, you won't know pain more than losing your Darkmoon Fair buff 5 minutes after getting it because you did something stupid and overpulled, and then you have to go all the way back and go to Darkmoon Fair and relearn it, and it's just, no. Like, it's so much easier to just get these items and then get the Darkmoon top hats. Now, moving on to the items that are very, very, very important for speedrunning, but if you're just doing like fast leveling, not necessarily recommended. And the first item that I'm going to quickly cover is Moonfang's Pelt. Now, this is another Darkmoon Fair quest item, but the reason that I've put this in the speedrun only category is this thing is pricey. Now, I said that these things already were in the high price range. This is on a different level. Now, I had to spend upwards of 2,000 gold for like individual items in here, like on the very high end. Some of them went as low as like 200. This one cost me 5,000 gold, and I've been told that's relatively cheap for most servers. So if you really want to do speed leveling, or speed running, I suppose, this is kind of a mandatory item. But if you don't, yeah, you're probably just better off not using it. It's not really worth it if you're trying to save money. Next up, we have the absolute classic speedrunning staple, Gunshoes. So I'm sure you've seen this a million times if you've watched any of my videos, but just to demonstrate it again, you attach guns to your feet and you go flying across the ground. Whee! So, you know, pretty straightforward. It's just a really good speed boost. It has a 3-minute cooldown, but it doesn't share a cooldown with any other items, so it's basically like its own speed boost that you can pop. One thing I forgot to show, it can go across water. So basically that's one of the things I said earlier. I don't use water walking mount equipment because you can use Gunshoes to just fly across like this lake, for example, in Silverpine. And next up, we have Cracked Radinax Controller. So I've talked about this a few times, but Cracked Radinax Controller is an item you get from Argus from certain rares, and it's basically like Gunshoes, but it has 3 charges, and it has no internal cooldown. So watch this. It's about to expire, and it boots me off, and then I hit it again, and I'm immediately back on. It's very, very overpowered. Now, one thing that it is worth noting, even though it might not seem like it, it cannot go across water. So Gunshoes can go across water. This one cannot go across water. It basically hits a tar patch whenever it connects with water. So do keep that in mind. And then the last major speed item I'll cover is XA1000 Surface Skimmer. This one is basically like Gunshoes, but only for water. So pop it, you go really fast. One thing that's worth noting is you have to basically be like floating on the surface in order to get this to work. If you are underwater, it'll basically give you an error that says you can't use it. So sometimes you've seen me jump into water and kind of like finnick around, trying to find like that right little area where I can pop this thing because it keeps giving me the error message. Also, if you hit land, you can carry the momentum for a little bit, as you saw there. So that's another thing that I use sometimes. And then next up, let's cover the Electroshock Mountain Motivator. So this one is interesting. I haven't seen a ton of people using this. Actually, let me cover a mount that normally goes slow. So if I do this, you can see that the mount speed is actively increasing. But what happens is I get this debuff on me that increases it by 10% each time. Now, if I do it again, it goes up to 30%. The movement speed keeps increasing. And it refreshes the stack, by the way, so it goes all the way back to 10 seconds. But if I do it again, oh, it worked. Okay, now I'm at 4 stacks. This caps out at 5. So it's almost down, it's almost down. And then I'm going to use it again, and then it stuns me. So if you use this too many times, it will stun you. And obviously, eating an 8-second stun in the middle of a speedrun is not efficient. Now, you might be wondering, isn't that a bit too much of a risk to be worth using in a speedrun? No, if you use it properly. So, let me get my bags in the right order. There we go. So if you use this properly, the first charge and the second charge have a 0% chance to stun you. No matter how many times you use these first two, it will never stun you for 8 seconds. It has a like 100% success rate. So you're 100% safe to use 2 charges of this thing every single time. And that's just a 20% mount speed increase. Now, one thing I've noticed is, theoretically, the third charge has a 2% chance of stunning you. So that, what I just did, 2% of the time, that'll stun me for 8 seconds. Now, over the course of an entire speedrun, you could theoretically say that might not be worth it. But what I have noticed is there seems to be some sort of like hidden deprecation to the time where it'll like actually, or the percent chance that it'll actually stun you. So if I do 1, 2, and then I wait until this reaches around 5 seconds, and I do this again, I've tested this extensively, and you can see me doing this in every single speedrun. You also hear me muttering under my breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll count down to 5, and then I'll press it again. I've never been stunned by it once in a speedrun in my tests when I do it down to 5 seconds. I'm not really sure what the exact math on it is, but all I know is that's the safest way to use this item. You use it 2 times, and then you wait 5 seconds, and then you use it a 3rd time, and then you let it completely fall off and repeat the process. Next up, we have something that I actually don't think I've used in any of my speedruns because it's not actually useful for Horde. I believe some of the Alliance route has underwater sections, so it could be useful there. By the way, Alliance route, another super requested video. I'm working on it. As I've said, it's going to take me some time. But you have Shimmerscale diving suit. So I pop this, and I just swim really fast. That's it. It's that straightforward. Nothing else to it. You just swim fast. So if you have a quest that makes you dive into a lake, like in Red Ridge, there's one where you have to swim into the lake to like loot a dirt pile. Popping one of these is very fast. It helps. Horde has no section in their entire run that requires them to go underwater. There are times when you have to cross the lake here, or times where you have to like cross a river, but you're never actually underwater. You're just skimming across the surface. So this I never use. I always pack 20. Just in case. I mean, you never know. Better safe than sorry. But, you know, it's more for Alliance. Now, next 2 items are kind of similar. So you have Swiftness Potion, increases your run speed by 50% for 15 seconds, and then Lightfoot Potion, increases your movement speed by 150%, but it lasts 8 seconds. And this requires level 40. So effectively, what you're going to want to do, they also share a cooldown. You're going to use Swiftness Potions all the way up until 40, and then you're going to replace them with Lightfoots. So I'm not going to show Swiftness Potion. It's just basically, Swiftness Potion is if you did Minari Training Amulet, I'll show it when it comes off cooldown. It's basically a ever so slightly faster Minari Training Amulet that doesn't take your health, but this is Lightfoot. So you pop Lightfoot, gives you 150% move speed for 8 seconds. It is worth noting there is another potion that is similar called Sky Step Potion. Sky Step Potion, you cannot stop moving. So Sky Step Potion puts you on like a little ball, and it rockets you forward. So it's kind of like Gunshoes or Radinax in that it puts you in like a unstoppable control thing. Lightfoot does not. Lightfoot just gives you 150% move speed, and both of them are 150%. So you have an item that gives you the same move speed but makes you impossible to steer, and another one that does the same thing but lets you get full control of your character. The option's clear, basically, is what I'm saying. And here is Minari Training Amulet, which basically, same as Swiftness Potion, except this does not share a cooldown with Swiftness Potion, which is why it's so good. Now let me re-equip Heart of Azeroth. Last two things, so we have F.R.I.E.D. F.R.I.E.D is a consumable that you'll sometimes use at low levels. It's pretty useful. It's like some early sketchy pulls. You can just drop one of these and one-shot a bunch of mobs. It's not 100% useful, but it's also pretty cheap. So I decided to put it in this category of like, if you're speedrunning, it's good to have it. If you're just casually leveling, like, you could take this. I mean, it's not very expensive, but it's also just not as useful as the other items. And then we have Bear Tartare. I guess I'll get the food buff for this just to showcase it, but most people know what this does. Bear Tartare is an item that whenever you kill an enemy, you gain a short burst of speed. So if you watch my latest Druid run, I use this extensively. I think I had it in my Hunter run, but I didn't get as many chances to showcase it. But you'll see me just chaining mob kills in the end of my Druid run, and it's pretty nutty. So you see here, increase speed for a short time after killing an enemy. So this is my normal walk speed, and then I do this, and I move faster. It's about to fall off. I do this, it refreshes. There's no cooldown on it. As long as you keep killing mobs, you keep getting the 5-second move speed buff. So if you chain kill mobs, that's just a flat, whatever percent that amounts to. Does it say? It actually doesn't give me the exact percent. It's a pretty decent bit. I think it's like 10%, might be 20. Either way, it's good. There's some debate on whether or not you want to be using Bear Tartare or Stat Food at higher levels. Personally, I like Bear Tartare. I think it's very good. I would say it's up to you. I generally do not struggle killing things at higher levels, and I don't think Stat Food gives enough to make it worth running over something that just directly gives you a big move speed increase. But that's your call to make. Now, that's it for the items that I'd say are mandatory for speedrunning itself. And now I'm going to start covering the more niche use case items that I use, but really most people do not need to worry about it. So first off, we have Lemon Herb Filet. This is a food item that I use up until level 40. So Lemon Herb Filet gives versatility, but the interesting thing about it is that I have food buff, and it's been 2 seconds. So Lemon Herb Filet functions very similar to an item that a lot of people might be familiar with called Darkmoon Fish Feast. So Darkmoon Fish Feast has been popularized, well, all the way back in challenge modes. It was very popular, but, you know, challenge modes were not popular as a game mode. But people started using it more recently in Mythic Plus, and it's become pretty big there. So if you've done a lot of keys, you've probably known of Darkmoon Fish Feast. This is basically an even faster individual version of Darkmoon Fish Feast. So it's good. Obviously, it gives versatility. I do not believe there's another stat equivalent, so you're going to have to take versatility. That said, it's just fast. So even if versatility isn't your best stat, I would still recommend using it. Next up, we have Flasks. So these are the 4 flasks that I use throughout the run, every 10 breakpoints. So Darkmoon Firewater has no level requirement, but I use it from 10 to 20 because it has no level requirement. It increases your attack power, it says by 17, but I believe it scales weird at certain levels. So even though at low levels the tooltip still says 17, it only gives about 7, if I remember correctly. It's strange. And then you have Elixir of the Mongoose, gives you 10 agility and critical strike. Elixir of the Cobra gives you 16 critical strike. And then finally, Greater Flask of the Currents. Now, obviously, Greater Flask of the Currents, there are versions for every stat. Elixir of the Cobra, I believe there is a verse counterpart, but I'm not sure about Haste and Mastery. And as far as I know, there's no great counterparts for Elixir of the Mongoose, for agility, that is. I believe there's an intellect and strength counterpart, but there is only this in terms of agility flasks. And then Darkmoon Firewater, it's just attack power. I recommend anybody use this unless you're a spell power user, in which case there might be a spell power version. I'm not really sure, though. I think Darkmoon Firewater might be, like, unique. So I'd say if you're a spellcaster, sorry, but look into that. Next up, we have Augment Runes. So there's a lot of different Augment Runes out there. They all give the exact same buff, and they all require level 40. Pop this. Just gives you an extra 4 agility. It stacks on top of everything else. The reason I choose Hyper Augment is because I checked the auction house, and these were the cheapest. It's really that simple. Next up, we have Potion of the Tol'vir. There are a lot of different, like, or I guess I call them pre-pots, but now they're just potions, that you can use while leveling until you get the next one, Unbridled. So I guess I'll talk about these, you know, in combination. Unbridled is the best potion for most classes at max level. I would recommend double checking. If you're a melee DPS or a hunter, this is your best potion. If you're a caster, I know a lot of you have this as your best potion, but if you are a caster, I'd recommend just doing a double check. Some of you have weird things, you know, maybe there's like some other potion that's better, but this is just really good. Even at max level, but especially while leveling. As you might have noticed, a lot of stuff that's used while leveling is like damage procs. So not all of them scale the same. Some of them basically scale down and do 1 damage, which obviously that's not good. But if you have stuff like Elemental Force and Unbridled Fury, like just popping off on multiple targets, Mark of the Hidden Satyr, those all do pretty decent chunks of damage, and you can just global mobs with like a single like Moonfire tap. If you see in some parts of my Druid speedrun, I cast 1 Moonfire and I get a bunch of procs and it just melts. Like, you don't need to do anything. Also, you've seen me do a few pulls where I just apply Moonfire to like 10 mobs, and I just have all of these procs just firing off, and I just sit there reapplying my dots, and the mobs just tick down from passive damage. So stuff like Unbridled really helps for that. But before you can use it, because it requires level 40, Potion of the Tol'vir is what I use for agility. There are other options for different classes. There's obviously a intellect and strength counterpart. It's going to be a Cataclysm thing. I forget the exact name because I haven't leveled them much, but just look into that. Next up, so this is an interesting one. We have weapon buffs. So these are not to be confused with weapon enchants such as Elemental Force. If you see here, this already has Elemental Force on it. Oh, I can't apply it because I'm level 50, but take my word for it that if this wasn't level 50, you would be able to apply Adamantite Weightstone on top of Elemental Force. You can stack them, and you can see me doing that in my Druid run. So Adamantite Weightstone is the best Weightstone that you can get, but there are also 2 different other things which basically cover every single class except, I believe, Hunter. Actually, I'm not sure, but either way, there's Weightstones, and there's a few others that you can get below Adamantite. There's Sharpening Stones, which work for non-blunt weapons, so you see here balances your blunt weapon. Any sharp weapons like or polearms, swords, axes, daggers, etc. You want to use Sharpening Stones for those. Weightstones are for maces and staves. Yeah. And then there's weapon oils as well, which are for casters. So you have like mana oils and stuff like that you can apply to caster weapons. That'll give you like intellect buffs. So it's all basically the same item. It's just the name differentiates between like what you're going to use it for. So if you're a caster, you're going to use oils. If you're a like sharp weapon user, you're going to use Sharpening Stones. If you're a heavy weapon user, you're going to use Weightstones. These things are pretty good, but they're also pretty expensive. So that's why I put them in this category. If you are really min-maxing, they're definitely a good thing to have. And yeah, I'd recommend checking it out. Make sure that you're sure which one it is. Like I said, for Hunter, I think that weapon oils work, but I'm not 100% sure. So look into that if you are a Hunter. Next up, we have Abyssal Healing Potions, or just healing potions in general, as like a item type. Now, I know a bunch of people might be surprised to see me put healing potions in here, and that's because I just really don't think they're that useful. You know, if you are about to die, you can obviously pop one, but Generally speaking, I don't die unless I do something really, really colossally stupid. So you just don't really need it. If you're playing a class that has low self-healing, 100% get healing potions. Like if you're playing a warrior, yeah, get healing potions. But if you're playing like a druid, a monk, a warlock, paladin, anything like that that has some sort of easy spammable self-heal, just, you don't really need to bother with these. I keep 20, but these are the 20 healing potions that I brought with me to my recent Druid World record run. I didn't need to restock. I still have the same 20. I didn't use any. Just don't really need them. Next up, we have War Scrolls. So these are interesting because it really depends on what you need. So I brought along War Scroll of Battle Shout because I was playing Guardian Druid and attack power was good for me. Now, if you are not playing a melee or general like attack power damage user, which includes Hunter, you don't need to bring this along. And also, if you're a warrior, this doesn't stack with your actual Battle Shout, so you do not need to use it. If you're a caster, you're going to want to use War Scroll of Arcane Intellect, or whatever that thing is called. There is other stuff. I believe there's a War Scroll of Fortitude. You can use that. It's just questionable whether or not it's useful. Like, that's a survivability thing. And like I said, it's the same thing with healing potions. If you're not going to die anyway, do you really need it? It's just an extra cost per run. So I'd say that's a judgment call. I didn't include it here, but I guess it's worth mentioning. But definitely, I would say the attack or spell power ones, Battle Shout and Arcane Intellect, get those. And next up, there's something a bit interesting. So this is crafted gear. So I'll move this up here just to have it all in the same place. We have armor, rings, and trinkets. So the two most important, for sure, are the trinkets and the rings. As I mentioned earlier, the stats on these do not scale well. Admiral Taylor's Loyalty Ring, or whatever other garrison ring you have, or I think it's called Ghost Pirate Ring, and Dread Pirate Ring, these do not scale well, like at all. The stats on these vastly outweigh it, and they have a socket, so they're just better. Now, it's worth noting if I go into my jewel crafting and I find, where is it? Kyanite Ring. So what you can do is you have like this thing here, that's this Kyanite Ring and the Quick Blade. You can use Relics of the Past to set it at lower levels. So I can get level 14 rings, I can get level 23, 32, etc. Now, one thing you might notice that I kind of fucked up, I just forgot and I was in a hurry. I made all Kyanite rings. These are unique equipped. However, Kyanite and Soulstone are not unique equipped. So I can have one of each of these types, which means, if you see here, this is main stat verse, but it has minor stat crit. This is main stat crit, minor stat verse. So, for example, you know, if the stats I wanted were crit verse, that's what I would want to do. I would want to get the crit heavy one and keep making it until it rolled verse, and then same with the verse one. Keep making it until it rolls crit. Amazingly, I actually caught these in my first try while testing it here on the beta. So these are the first two rings I crafted, but you know, normally it's going to take you a few more attempts. And these are really nice because of the socket, which gives you a ton of extra stats. I'll cover that in a moment though. It's the next thing up after the other items. And then we have the trinkets. So similarly, if we go to heirloom trinkets, so heirlooms, and then the one that most people use, I would say, is like Swift Hand of Justice or like Infallible Tracking Charm. There's a few, but basically, your mileage may vary with these things, and also not everybody has them. They're a bit hard to get. So, yeah, you could use these, you could not, but these are the ones that most people use. And compare the stats real quick. 24 haste to, this is, first of all, at a lower level, 11 agi, 6 crit, 9 verse. And this is 11 levels below this item, or I guess 10, because it stops scaling at 49. So 24 haste versus that. Now imagine at an equal level, this 100% outweighs Swift Hand of Justice. It does way more damage, or gives you way more damage. So I highly recommend using these things. They're very, very, very cheap. You might need to do a few rerolls, because if I remember correctly, you cannot actually specify one of the stats. So here, you get main stat crit, and then it's only RNG between the 3 other stats. Here, if you want a specific combination, you're going to have to roll over and over until you get that. Also, you can equip 2 of these. It's not the same as with the rings. So yeah, it can require a lot more crafting. That said, each individual craft on these tends to be pretty cheap. So if you have a decent amount of gold, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, these are the things that I recommend using if you want to min-max, but you don't want to spend a ton of money. Rings and trinkets are very, very good. Then you get into the crafted gear. So I've only crafted one as an example because otherwise, we'd be here all day. So here is an example of the best type of crafted item, and it is the Mist of Pandaria Crafted Dreadful Gladiators set. And this is good, partially just because it has good stats, but also because it has a socket. And, you see here it has +1 intellect as a socket bonus. Obviously, if I use that for Guardian, that wouldn't really matter. But if you do have a socket bonus that is relevant to your, damage type, that's just icing on the cake. But it's good armor with pretty solid stats that also just gives you a flat extra amount of stats on top of what you already have. So it's nice to have. That said, these things are expensive as fuck. So I highly don't recommend getting these unless you are extremely serious about speedrunning. I mean, hell, you've seen some of my runs. I don't even use these. First of all, you have to go through so many different hoops to even RNG into the right recipe. So just to quickly explain it, in order to get these, since I'll be honest, it took me a bit to figure out. First of all, you need to learn Pandaria either leatherworking or blacksmithing, and then you need to go to your trainer and learn all of the stuff. But then in order to actually get these patterns, they're not learned through a recipe or by the trainer. They're RNG'd by making Magnificence of Leather. So this is a daily cooldown that gives you one of 40-something patterns, and it has a daily cooldown. It's so annoying to get all of these. So I have a few of them, but I don't even have all of them. It's just a pain in the ass, and it's for a very, very, very marginal gain. That said, when min-maxing, every little bit does count, but compared to all of the other stuff I've discussed, this is infinitely more expensive for infinitely more marginal of a gain. I don't really recommend it. Next up, we have something that kind of goes hand in hand with these, which is gems. So most items don't really have gem slots, but obviously if you are taking advantage of these rings or the crafted items, you can use gems. So it's worth noting that these are the 2 best types of gems. A lot of gems have gotten completely screwed by the level squish. So these require item level 44. They are Argus gems. So the way you unlock these, if I go here, Legion Designs, so I have these through Legion, you have to go and do the Argus unlock intro, and then after you learn Legion Jewel Crafting, there's a quest where you pick it up, I think, in the Vindicar, and then you have to get one of each type of Legion gem and, insert it into, a panel to unlock the recipes. It's kind of confusing. I recommend looking up a step-by-step guide if you're interested in it. It's not too hard, but the main issue with these gems is they're only usable on items that are I forget exactly what it is. I think it's 42 or something. It says item level 44, but obviously these require 45 and they're item level 52. So it's not exact. It's low 40s is basically when you can start socketing in these gems. So it's only for a very small portion of the tail end of the run. They all give 7 stats. There's 1 for each type. So they're nice to have, but they're less universally applicable. And then we have the other best gems, which are equally problematic, but in a different way. So these are Lich King gems. I've taken a few just to give an example. Nightmare Tear is the best one, or Tier. Yeah, I guess, in this case it would be Nightmare Tier, not Tear. Nightmare Tier gives +4 all stats, but you can only have 1. So you're going to want to have 1 of these at all times. It's just pretty good. Technically speaking, it even beats out these ones. But these other gems have no item level requirements. So you see here, requires item level 44. Here, there's nothing. It doesn't say that. And it works. You can socket it in to any item. So I do this. Oh, sockets in. Do this. Sockets in. I want to socket this in here. Boom. Sockets in. You can socket these into any item. This, or these, obviously, I think this is high enough item level. Or actually, no. So look, if I try to do this, item is too low level to accept that gem. But if I try to overwrite here, since I've already showed it, that's Glinting Dreadstone, 2 agility, 2 crit. It sockets in here. Now, these ones give basically 4 total stats, so they're better than any other gems that you can get up until the Argus gems. The problem with these is, like the Mists of Pandaria crafted items, they are a pain in the ass to get. You basically need to unlock the recipes by doing like a bunch of dailies in Old Dalaran, and you need to do either 4 dailies or farm a bunch of like titanium powder. Let me see if I have any in my bags. Yeah, this item, titanium powder. If you farm 10 of it and do a like repeatable turn-in, you can get one of what's the item? It's like here we go. Yeah, Dalaran Jewel Crafter's token. So you can get that, and then when you get 4, you can buy a single one of these recipes. So if you only want to get Nightmare Tier and 1 other gem, yeah, it'll be a decent bit of grinding, but it might be worth it. But if you're trying to level multiple different characters that have different stat priorities, it's a really big hassle to try and get this to work out. And lastly, we have something that is very, 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 very specific, but also quite good in the place where it's useful, and that is Spires of Arak buffs. So obviously in the speedrun itself, you want to pick Hearthfire Tavern, or I forget what the Alliance counterpart is called. It's something different. It's like some kind of inn. But basically, you're going to want to pick the one that gives you the Hearthstone because it has a passive effect that gives you 20% experience. However, if you pick the other option, the Smuggler's Den, you get access to a vendor that has a chance to sell you these items that give you world buffs while in Spires. Now, these are very powerful, but they're also BOE, so you can trade them. So that's the other reason why you don't want to pick Smuggler's Den, because you just get this on an alt, you buy the items every 10 minutes. Like, I basically, when I'm farming stuff, I will just have one character sitting in Spires, and then I will go farm like some ore, then log over, get the item in Spires, then log back for 10 more minutes, and just rinse repeat, just checking every 10 minutes when the ability cooldown's up. And these things are very, very good. So just starting off, Ogre Blood Potion increases damage and healing by 20%. Raven Lord's Talon reduces all resource costs by 30%. Plume of Celerity increases haste by 10% and movement speed by 10%. Orb of the Soul Stealer, you gain 5% of all damage and healing you deal as healing. And Pride Hunter's Fang, all damage you deal also causes the target to bleed for 20% of damage done over 4 seconds. So very, very, very powerful buffs. That said, you're not going to be in Spires for that long. Now, these things are not very expensive if you farm it yourself. If you're buying it off the vendor, they're dirt cheap. But I think this is more of like a time cost item. It's like, if you are very, very serious about speedrunning, you can go to Spires, you can get Smuggler's Den on another character, and sit there and do what I do, and every 10 minutes log over to buy it, because you'll only have one up. So if you go to the vendor, only one of these 5 items will be available, and only one of them. So ideally, you're going to want probably 2 of each going into a speedrun just to be safe. So that means that the shortest amount of like visits that you'll have to make to the vendor will be 10 for 2 of each item. And obviously, it's not guaranteed that they'll cycle. You might get Pride Hunter's Fang, as I did, 4 times before you ever see an Ogre Blood Potion. So it really depends. It's a lot of time invested to get these items for a decent buff, but only in one zone in a section of the run that I've basically tried to chop as much out of as possible. If you've noticed recently, I go to Spires for a short amount of time as I possibly can. But yeah, so that covers pretty much everything. I just realized I've been talking for 45 minutes straight. Oh my god, I thought this was going to be a 15-minute video, and I ended up literally just talking nonstop for almost 50 minutes. Holy fuck. Time flew. Well, that is a detailed overview of every single consumable, item, enchant, whatever that you will need for speedruns. And I really hope this is helpful, because I have gotten a ton of requests for this. So also, later today, I'm planning on recording a dungeon leveling video with some of my friends. That's another thing, not quite as requested, but a few people have asked, and it's something that I've personally been interested in. So what I'm going to do is test a bunch of different dungeons and zones, and really just, it's going to be more casual. Like, I'll just be having fun with my friends. Like, we're not going to be doing speedrun strats per se. It's more of a testing it to see, for the time spent with the average group, what is the most efficient expansion that you can dungeon in. So I guess stay tuned for that. I'm not sure how much footage I'll get today. I might need to do like another session to get like a full video's worth of footage. But another reason I'm doing that is honestly, I just need something to take my mind off the election today. Hopefully. It's going to be a long week, folks, if you're in the US. Man. But anyways, I won't drag on too long, so I really hope you all found this helpful. I will try to timestamp the video as I upload it. Obviously, I want to just get this out there, but I'm probably going to go through and update the description with timestamps on every single item to make it easier. But yeah, later.